Okay, here we are. We're going live. All right. So Roger Ver is free. Thank you for joining us. We're going to just take a little time to get people rolling in here as we are going live. We had John Richardson with us, the great John Richardson. Hopefully Taylor Hudak will be hopping in. She's supposed to hop on. Hopefully she's okay there. And we do know Keith is not feeling under the weather, so he won't be joining us today. But we do have the great John Richardson with us, coming to us live from Toronto, Canada. And some of you know the question I'm going to ask him next. John, do you have your 32-ounce McDonald lamp? There it is. We're ready. We're powered up. We are powered up, ready to get going today. This is going to be a very, very interesting episode, and I'm very excited about it because it's really the culmination of many, many things that have been going on. We've been watching the Roger Ver and been a part of it, and we've been helping Taylor with her article here. That I'll get this up here, right here. Her article that she wrote on the lawfare against it. It's an incredible article, and it's right here. This really goes over the. Hang on, where is it? There it is. Okay, let me get this one up here. Remove this one. That's my little nose. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So let's get to. So here we go. So here it is. This is Taylor's article. And I can put this link in the super chat right now if you guys haven't read it. And it really goes step by step. And we've covered this before in a previous episode with Taylor. It's incredible what the government did. And essentially, Roger was targeted because he called government jackbooted thugs for burning women and children. And here's Taylor. So great to see her here. We are discussing one of my favorite articles right now. Here she is. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you. It's great to be here. Great to be back. And we have, really interesting development in this case to talk about. In fact, yesterday, just like last night, I was, messaging you guys saying, hey, are there any links, any additional information? Because, of course, this broke in the media before the team, before Ver, anybody associated with him was really able to make a statement. So we did get that confirmation yesterday evening. And I thought it was quite interesting. I'm actually very curious to hear both of your thoughts on this. I may have some questions for you guys.
Oh, great.
You guys are the legal experts here.
All right. Well, actually, I was surprised because I was actually thinking this was going to be confidential. The agreement was going to be confidential. So I was expecting, because right, we were discussing last night. I said, I don't think we're going to have anything. And then during our email exchanges, boom, here it is. We got it. We got the whole exhibit 1. So here it is right here. We have it right here. So John's got some great analysis on it. So John sent over some slides. And so what I want to do is, so here's kind of what I have for a game plan today. John has some slides to go over the technical details of what this exactly means and the reasons why the government likely agreed to it. I have some background to how we all ended up here, like going back way here, how we're here. And I really want to talk about some of the things that you found and really a lot of the reasons why this went through and your help in getting Roger free. And I really think that, Taylor, your incredible help in explaining this. And because, every prosecution is a political battle. That's really the truth. Every prosecution is a political battle. So we're always fighting. You have to get your facts out there. You have to get your narrative out there. And I don't think anyone could have done a better job for Roger than you did in your lawfare case study. You lay it out with all the sites.
So very kind of you to say that. I appreciate it. And I definitely relied a lot on the expertise from both of you to formulate that report. So I'm really grateful for your insights here and very interested to hear what you have to say too, John, as well in your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And Taylor, if you have to step out, just let us know. We really appreciate you. You got different time zone and everything. So here, let me get to John's slides here. Okay. Let's get John's slides. So let me remove this, and here we go. Add John's slides here, and we'll get into this because I think this is going to be really helpful for everyone to understand. I appreciated it myself because I was looking at totally different things last night. So where did it go? Where is John's slides? Hang on. We have a lot of things going on here. There we go. Oh boy, we're having some problems today. Slides and PDFs. Let's go.
I can send them over to you.
No, that's not the issue. It's a StreamYard issue right now. I might have a little too many things going on. I might have a little too many slides going on, but I should be able to get it here. There we go. Fair settlement. All right. And oh, I see what I was doing. It's my fault. Yeah. I already had it up. There we go. Here we go. All right, here we go. Understanding the settlement. So thanks, John, for this. John
Yeah,
Richardson.
thank you, John.
This is great. So here we go. All right, John, you're going to direct me. So you're just going to say next when you're going to say next.
Not a lot of slides, but just I think it's important to understand the context of this. So much has gone on. I think it's important to remind and understand, okay, what this indictment was actually about, okay? And this is extremely important for people in the crypto community, for Americans abroad, et cetera, et cetera. But as we know, about a year ago or whatever, and I think actually the podcast you and I did was one of the first on it, just a few hours after. But what happened was that Roger Ver, known as the Bitcoin Jesus. By the way, I should say I don't know anything about Bitcoin on a personal level. Okay, so I'm not. Maybe that's good because I don't get caught into that particular analysis of it too much, right? But he was arrested in Spain under the extradition agreement between Spain and the United States. And just pausing on that point for a minute. Extradition is getting to be a bigger and bigger problem. Tomorrow, the Dan Duggan thing is going on, and Dan Duggan thing is going on in Australia, for example. And I think it would be useful to actually do a podcast sooner rather than later on the extradition. But anyway, he's extradited, and the charges are basically it's tax evasion. Okay, but there's two components to the tax evasion. The first is, and this is important for people expatriating, meaning renouncing U.S. citizenship or handing in green cards, to understand that you do not leave the land of the free for free. Okay, you're required to, list your assets and, in most cases, many cases, pay an exit tax, which is complicated, but it includes a deemed sale of all the assets that you have at that particular moment. And in his case, in Mr. Ver's case, that would include all of the crypto assets that he had. And it's like a fake sale, a deemed sale, and you have to pay a real tax on fake income, so to speak, right? So the first allegation was that and they're very clear in this. I reread the indictment last night. Okay, they're very clear, okay, that he misstated both the quantity and the value of his Bitcoin. Okay, quantity and value, that's important to understand. And tied into that was the other issue of who actually owned it. Was it owned by his company or was it owned by him personally? And I think it's worth noting that this particular settlement seems to be an agreement that he owned it all personally, even when everybody knows he did not own it all personally. So this actually overstates what the tax would have been. But in any case, that's the first component of it. Okay. And by the way, this is not the first time there's been an extradition over false 885 We have, I think it was the Timkoff case a few years ago coming out of London, who was a naturalized U.S. citizen. So this is a thing. Okay, it's rare, it's uncommon, but it is a thing. And the extradition treaties are part of the family of U.S. extraterritorial, I think maybe overreach. It's really a way of exporting U.S. criminal law into other countries. Now, the second component to this was, and this one I would have to say I think it's very simple. Okay. Is that he failed to. One thing I've always found interesting about Mr. Ver is that he expatriates and leaves these U.S. companies intact, right? And seems to, carry on with that. And of course, if it's a U.S. company, distributions from U.S. companies are taxable to non-resident aliens. I mean, this is not complicated. And the second allegation is that he failed to report the distributions as income. Okay, and that one's much simpler conceptually to understand, even though there wasn't much talk about it. So that's what the indictment was. Let's move on to the next slide here. So that's kind of the context. Now, I think it's very, very important here, very important. And I went back and checked this last night because somewhere along the line I saw the question, where does this 131,000 Bitcoin?
Yeah, I had that question too. Yeah.
maybe it was from you. But in any case, I had in my head that maybe we better figure that out. Okay. And to be very, very clear, the original indictment lays that out exactly where those were. Okay. And you'll see that totals approximately 131,000.
Okay.
What
Okay.
it does not specify is which ones were owned by his companies, his memory dealers, whatever it was, and which were owned by him personally. But there's where the allegation of 131,000 of these things. In other words, it was in the indictment itself. Okay, so moving.
Okay,
next.
so that's where it was. Okay, good. Thanks, John. Thank you.
It's right there. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Next. Okay. Now, so this is settled. All right, and I think it's important to understand what the settlement actually represents and where they got there, because it really cuts through all the issues raised in the defense to the indictment, which was really brilliantly put together. I mean, I think his lawyers have done a very good job. He's had various lawyers at various stages have done a good job. Part of the issue, there was all this discussion of what were they actually worth, and how many were there and stuff like that. And I remember in one of our previous discussions, what I had said was that the vulnerability in the case was not the value, but the quantity reported. Okay. And, in this case, now he agrees to this clearly under duress, as everybody does, but he did agree that, or let me put it this way, the agreed facts, okay, that were the basis of the settlement included ownership of him personally of approximately the 131,000 Bitcoin. Okay, so they agreed to that, or stipulated to it, maybe is a better word. Okay, and so that issue goes away, 131,000. He also agrees, interestingly, that it was willful tax evasion, defined using something called the Cheek standard, the intentional disregard of a known legal duty.
Yeah.
Which is the criminal standard on this. And that, why was that in there? Well, because it was a criminal case, right? And as a criminal lawyer, Anthony, you have to have intention, mens rea. So that's there. Basically, he's paying approximately 49 million. I'll take you through that in a second. Probably a little bit high, okay, for reasons that I'll give you. But he's agreeing to pay, if he hadn't been charged criminally, where it could have gone, just under a basic audit, etc. And then there's an agreement that this is what's called a deferred prosecution. I don't know a lot about that particularly, but the gist of it is that after 3 years, the government agrees to not proceed with these charges, provided that he's a good Boy Scout, which interestingly is defined as not violating any state, federal, or municipal laws, which, I would think would, give him a huge incentive to stay out of the United States.
Yeah, because you can't, right? Yeah, there's no way you can't. As long as you don't have anything to do with the United States, then he'll be fine. Because
probably that's probably. I don't know that I guarantee it. Okay, but probably the case. Certainly, if I were Mr. Ver, I would not go near the United States. Probably ever. Okay, but certainly not in that 3-year period. So again, I don't know anything about this particular, deferred prosecution means, but the gist of it is, as I understand it, is that after 3 years that they're calling the tolling period, they're going to agree that they're not going to proceed against him on these specific charges. Maybe there are more. Now, I think it's helpful to understand where this 49 million comes from. Okay, so that would be the next slide.
Okay, that's the next slide. And by the way, and the thing that I'm going to address here, because what you have in parentheses frightens every little part of me, and I think it should frighten all of us. That essentially what the government does is put Roger in a state of duress, and I'll explain, and we'll go with that. So he signs this with factual admissions that may or may not be true. And then the government, in its sole discretion, can say, hey, did you breach this thing or not? And again, the government has a sole discretion. So I'm going to be tackling that after John presents that. So we'll just get to the actual bill, how that's calculated.
I think that's important. I think just to add to what you're saying there, trials are not a search for truth. Never have been.
No.
Search for proof. Okay. And it's not, I mean, I kind of go back and forth on the strength of the government's case. Could they have proven this or not? I don't know. But I do think if this were to get in front of a jury, I think there's enough complicating factors. Okay, but in any
we'll talk
case,
about it. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Here we go. Now we'll use the word stipulation, meaning same thing as agreed value. Now notice that he's agreeing, or the thing is proceeding on the basis that that he owned 130,000 bitcoins at the time he expatriated, which is roughly the same as 131,000. Now, notice that they're clearly attributing the Bitcoin owned by his company to him.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
That has some significance here, probably in terms of an overpayment. The valuation of the Bitcoins, I remember seeing things ranging from 100 to 800. The 564 Bitcoin value seems to me to be in the defensible range. Okay, so notice the government's not overreaching here. Okay, in the sense that they're going for the highest range. Okay, which I think is wise. And they're agreeing on a basis for this of about 3 million. But I mean, if you run through the numbers here, which I did this morning while looking at the agreement, what you're going to get is a gain under the 877A of about $70 million. Okay. In other words, that is an income inclusion on the day before expatriation. Okay. By the way, apparently he declared on no Bitcoin. Okay, which is interesting. But whatever, let's not go there. This is, in other words, what's important is that what he's agreeing to is exactly what was in the government's indictment. Okay.
Right. And I would say this too. And one thing that was sort of breezed by here is this stipulated basis, because basis is actually incredibly difficult to determine with cryptos because they get commingled with themselves. You can't track stuff out of a certain thing. There's really a guess of what your basis is, which sort of undermines the entire thing about the U.S. income tax, which is supposed to tax you on your gains. Well, we can't calculate your gains. And so the stipulated basis is actually really critical for the government, because without that, well, what's the basis? Well, it's something like this, and then you can tack them on their accuracy, because really it's not. The government made it up on its own. They made up this law on their own that cryptocurrencies should be taxed like property, with no authority. And there's not even a law. It's a press release from the IRS that did this. So I mean, that's one of the most amazing things on this. This is all predicated. This entire indictment's predicated on a press release. That's what it is. There's no actual law. Congress never decided how cryptocurrencies could be made. In the absence, I don't know why there's a default assumption that it should be taxable. Why? Why is that the rule? I don't understand that.
61, I don't know that it's an assumption, Anthony. Section 61 of the Internal Revenue Code fundamentally says that any accretion in value, whatever is income. But let's not get on.
Yeah, right. Well, right. Again, yeah, that's aside.
You just go back to the previous slide for 1 second.
Oh, sure, you bet. But yep.
Okay, now, because I think it's important that people understand where this figure comes from and what was stipulated to. So let's forget the 3 million basis. It's really 100% gain for all practical purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
Here.
Yeah.
So basically, that's a $70 million income inclusion, which would be a 20% long-term gain plus 3.8% net investment income tax. The numbers I ran were incredibly close. Okay, we're incredibly close to what they had. So that's where that figure comes from. Now there's a section 6663 penalty, which is something to do with civil fraud that I don't know anything about, but they've added on that. And then there's the interest charge. And you'll see that adds up to around 49 million. Okay, that's where the figure comes from. But what I think is important for people to understand is that the whole thing is based on an agreement to the facts in the indictment. Okay, it doesn't seem to me that they were negotiating the facts. Okay, it was, here is what, if you go back to the indictment, okay, the agreement, okay, is based on an agreement to those facts, right? Insofar as, okay, what the government alleged in terms, remember the issues, quantity and value, right? How many there were on the valuation. All right, so that's where that comes from. Now, I would also add here that it seems to me right? Now, a majority of those, if my memory is correct, something like 70,000 of those were owned inside his company. Now, if 70,000 of those were owned inside his company, arguably, okay, the valuation of this stuff might have been less, because remember that if the company owns the shares, he owns the shares in the company, right? So it's a question of what he could sell memory dealers for, not the crypto. But that said, next. Okay, now, you asked us, why did the government settle this? Well, I mean, I have a number of theories on this. You recall that the reply raised a lot of issues. Is the exit tax constitutional, right? Is there a constitutional right to renounce U.S. citizenship? I don't think I don't think the government anticipated these to be issues, and I certainly don't think these are issues they want to be litigated. Okay?
Not right now. Not right now.
Yeah.
And John, if I just want to, really explain something about what the government does all the time in various things and how it creates fake income. And I think it goes to this sort of market assumption we have that's actually kind of ridiculous if you think about it. And it's really, when you're the one who buys something at auction, you're the winner of the auction. Is that really the fair market price, or you're just the last idiot to bid, right? So if you sell something at an auction, you can't say, well, that's the value for every single thing. No, that was just one person who was willing to pay. But that's exactly what we do when the IRS deems sales or does mark-to-market calculations, that it says its value, like, oh, this is the value of a thing without you selling it. Well, you selling it depresses its value because it does that. And that's what the government constantly does all the time with these fake sales. And so I really do think with the composition of the Supreme Court as it is now, it's not accurate, and the IRS could lose a lot more than just the exit tax. The whole deemed sale thing is a lie. It's a lie. No, that is not what it's worth, because if you actually go to sell it, you're going to find a different result. You're assuming everyone will pay the exact same price as the highest last bidder. That's not how reality works any way, shape, or form. If you sell all your stock in some company, it actually might just get down to the asset value. Because who's going to buy it? What is it actually worth? And that's really, I think, a lot of the deceptions go on. And I think a lot of people also fall into that trap when they look at their portfolio to say, oh, wow, this is what my portfolio is worth. It's like you're making the assumption that when everyone sells their stock, everyone's going to buy it at that high value. That's not accurate in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's one of the issues, again, that would the Supreme Court would not have a lot of sympathy for. So I would say the constitutionality of 877A is a big thing, because Roger Ver can afford to fight back, right? He's one of the guys, like, he's got the assets to fight back and bring this to the Supreme Court. So I think that's one issue, one reason why that really they didn't want that. They don't want 877A under scrutiny.
Well, there's really two issues that you're raising here. Okay. I mean, let's imagine that, the value of these things could be calculated with certainty. That doesn't change the dubious constitutionality of 877A, because 877A is based on, a deemed sale, right? Not a real sale, meaning no income received. The second point, though, you're making is also very, very important. And this was raised in the defense was, how do these things actually get valued? I mean, they're not traded. It's not like they're on the New York Stock Exchange or something. And his claim was that he owned so many that, he would essentially crash the market, if he tried to sell, et cetera, right? So, that's another issue, and that's a very important issue. And I think that fits into the category of not being able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, right? But, absolutely that's the case. However, I've always felt on the issue of how many were actually owned, that he had that was the part, okay, where he'd have the most difficulty defending it. But in any case, we don't know. Then maybe, I don't know. I mean, there's been some speculation. I mean, he spent a lot of money, lobbying the Trump administration. Maybe the Trump Justice Department, was perhaps more sympathetic to him. I mean, it was the Biden administration that got this started. I don't know. But that aside, leaving aside the politics, there are issues here. There are live issues here that the IRS would prefer to not lose on. Okay.
Right. There's a lot. Oh, there's a lot going on here. I mean, and I think the entire thing is actually that's sort of what and that's what we'll get into. There's a lot the government is doing, has been doing, and this case is really pulling the rug back on a lot of it. So yeah, getting it away. Now the other thing too is the government gets though. This is sort of what the government gets is it's now able to prove things it couldn't have proved before. What was Rogers' basis? How many did he owe? But they got a stipulation from him that magically lines up exactly with their indictment.
Well, but
Wow, huh?
Anyway. My point, Anthony. I mean, he agreed. The agreement, the stipulation, whatever you want to call this, okay, they agreed to the facts alleged in the indictment.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, this was not a negotiation. Well, there was a negotiation only in the sense that here, if you agree to this, you can avoid incarceration.
That's right. It's not a negotiation again. And the last thing I want to do is I understand why Roger accepted this. I would have done the same thing.
Anybody would
have done the same thing. And when you see it, and we'll get to that in a few minutes, when you see everything that's against you, you truly have no choice. You really don't have a choice. And so this is, and that's really what we have, an agreement under duress that the government's going to say is enforceable. That's basically what it is. All right. So what do we got here? A drive-by shooting. Yeah.
It is a drive-by shooting. There's no
question.
I mean, the way I see it is, really, it's like, it reminds me of, one of these data security breaches, heist things, right? Where somebody, gets a hold of your banking information or this sort of stuff, and you have to pay the ransom. Yeah, it was a ransom, really.
Yeah. It's a ransom. Yeah, that's what it is. You're ransoming your freedom, 100%. Yep.
But more specifically, I mean, these are clear messages, okay, coming out of this for the general public, okay? First one is the profits from cryptocurrency are taxable and must be reported, okay? Whether you agree with this or not, that's part of the message here, okay?
Exactly, 100%, yep.
Second, expatriation, renouncing citizenship, handing it is a taxable event, okay? So you better figure out what that would look like.
You are
and also,
of the United States.
Yes. Also, as I've always said, what does your life look like after you? The thing that is most inexplicable to me about Mr. Ver is that he would continue, with his U.S. companies intact, right? I mean, if you want to get out of the United States, get everything out. Next, Form 8854. I mean, obviously it may be audited, and if you're going to file this stuff, you file accurately, okay? I think also we have extradition. And we're seeing this. I think we're going to see more and more of this. A very powerful tool to force compliance. Now, you and I have talked about the Schwartzbaum F-bar case. I saw something a week or so ago about, suggesting, okay, that there may be activity on that in the direction of trying to, some extraterritorial initiatives, to get them to comply with this stuff. But I mean, it is a factor. And I think what people need to understand is that, it's not only a question of, are you in a country that the U.S. has a direct extradition treaty with? I mean, basically, it's going to impair your ability to travel the world, okay, with these things out there. And then finally, as painful as it is, those who renounce citizenship do not escape the application of U.S. law, right? I mean, we're seeing a lot of that. So I think those are the, if you were to look at the Roger Ver thing, those would be, I think, probably the messages that the U.S. government is trying to get out to the world, right? And, I think I think the message is fairly clear.
Absolutely. And this is the question I want to ask everyone today. Oh, did I read? Oh, hold on. I got a little typo there. Hang on. Let me fix this here. We got a lot of our regulars are here today. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. So here, what do you think? Should Roger have taken the deal? Because I want to get some responses because I have my analysis of why basically he had no choice. So I'm just curious if anyone at this point thinks that he shouldn't have taken it, if they think that he should have fought it tooth and nail. Just curious where people are. I am, hey, look, I've had clients guiding them through plea agreements before. It is an agonizing decision. And, here's the part that basically makes it, you have to do it, because the thing about a trial is it's the worst experience of your life. It goes on forever. So the trial itself, if he said, okay, I don't want to do it, it's going to be years of agony and questioning with that sword hanging over your head. So the process itself is the punishment. It's part of the punishment. So just curious if anyone thinks he should have taken the deal, because I'm going to get into my analysis right now. I don't think so. I don't think we're going to have anyone there. Is that, we have it, John. And by the way, if you are thinking of pronouncing John as your 8854, and he goes through all these issues. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. So I want to get into what I have here. So I'm going to take away your slides and add what I had. And this is really my one slide. This is my one slide. Well, all right. So here we go. Hello world. Thank you. Hey, Taylor. All right. Hello world. So Taylor, right now, I just asked the question if people should take the deal. Do you think Roger did the right thing by taking the deal? Taylor, what do you think? Do you think, without knowing anything more, do you think he should have taken the deal?
This is such an interesting question because it did come up when I was working on the Assange case. Should he have taken the deal? Should he have not taken the deal? Well, first of all, I just want to say, of course, it is, of course, up to Bear himself to make this deal. Nobody else can make that determination for him. I think that what is interesting is that it seems like this whole process, we didn't even have to go through this entire process. As you said, Anthony, the process itself is the punishment, because Bear has always maintained that he will pay whatever is owed. He has stated repeatedly that the U.S. government was never clear to him and refused to tell him exactly what he owed. So if they were to just be upfront, like they are now, I guess, and tell him at the very beginning, then perhaps he didn't have to go through this entire process. So that's an interesting element to this. But another thing, and forgive me, I did have to step out, so I'm going to have to rewatch this stream because I do want to hear both of your insights that was presented earlier. But from what I understand, again, I read through the document at least twice. I would like to go through it several more times to really absorb it. I'm not a legal professional, but one thing I did notice was that there was specific mention of the Form 8854, of course, and also the 1040 NR from 2014. There's not much reference, I don't think, of any of the documents from 2017. So it seems as if this, I guess it's not really a plea agreement, but this specific agreement, deferral agreement, is related to the 2014 tax issues and those charges, not the 2017 charges. Did either of you get that sense? Again, I should probably revisit this before I make those statements, but it seems as if they kind of are not putting too much focus into the 2017 related charges.
I'm not sure how to answer that. So,
Okay. Yeah.
Because I guess I see it as very, very a little bit different. So this is kind of what I wanted to get to, Taylor, and this is really where I want to step in, because where we have right now is like, because here's the concern that I have. Roger's like, hey, look, he signed the stipulation saying these facts are correct, and that the Department of Justice, in its sole discretion, that is the U.S. government, what happens if there's a change in policy in 3 years? Someone else gets in there, they could say, oh, you know what, we decided, Roger, by looking at it, it's funny, you violated the plea agreement, which is essentially why he was indicted in the first place, because he said bad comments about ATF employee. So that's essentially what happened anyway.
Let me clarify one point. I guess the willful wrongdoing. I know they use the term willful.
Yeah.
The willful withholding of information or whatever, that is related to the 2014 related charges. They don't make reference to that, I think, with regard to the 2017 issue. Again, maybe it's not such a big deal, but for me, it's something that kind of stood out to me.
Actually, you are correct. Thank you, Taylor. No, you actually, now I understand what
that
you're
makes
saying.
sense.
Yes.
So it
yes.
seems like
No.
they are not. He has not agreed to willful wrongdoing.
Right.
For 2017, but if I'm getting a little too technical, for it's not too big of a matter for the overall case here.
I would say it's very interesting, and that's the most important stipulation for the government. That one is the one that is key. Without that stipulation, they have a pretty much impossible to prove case. When you're trying to prove someone's, specific intent, you have to look at their evidence to say, okay, how do you infer that that's actually what they mean? But when someone says, hey, look, this is what I meant to do, well, boy, is your job easy now. So really, go ahead.
Yeah, and I also think too, I mean, again, I'm not a legal professional, but when I was looking at this, I thought, okay, they're applying the understanding that we have today about crypto to 2014.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like to me.
And
I mean, sure, he could say, yes, I had this amount. He could say that now, but at the time it was very, very difficult to make those determinations.
Exactly. Absolutely right. The AI didn't exist to track this stuff at the time, right? So very, very difficult. So great point. So what I have here, and this is my one slide I have for today, is basically what happens if the government just sort of comes up with some nonsense excuse to hold Roger. We're going to say that you breached the non-prosecution agreement. By the way, that's something that's just recently invented. I'll talk about that. So here's how this entire lawfare works, okay? And the government has done this over centuries. It's over centuries to remove the right to a fair trial from you so the government can commit this lawfare, squeeze you, twist your arm, put a gun to your head to say, sign this or else. And the or else is most certainly a loss in any way, even if you win. You can't win. It's an unwinnable situation no matter what. So the first thing that the government did, and this was really, really critical, and this has been pointed out to me, that the grand jury belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the government, but what has happened is the executive branch has taken that, hey, look, we're the prosecutor, and that right of grand jury belongs to us, so we can decide. Not the people who's breaking the rules. We can decide who's the problem in this world, and who the problem ends up being are often the people who are against the government. So that's the first problem. The people have been stripped of their right to grand jury. So in many cases, the entire indictment process, and really nearly every criminal procedure is flawed because it's not the people originating it. The people weren't asking for Roger Ver to be prosecuted. No, it was the government that was, and we know the reasons why, because of your incredible article. Now, then this is the second thing that happens, and look, I've gone through the law school combine, and this is the question never asked: is they create this false distinction. The courts created this false distinction, doesn't matter federal or state, between substantive due process and procedural due process. But when you think about it, wait, procedural due process. Wait. We're defining due process. Process means procedure. That's what it means. So what do you mean processable due process? So they created this phony distinction. And then what they did was like, well, look, if it's just the process due process, then we could do kind of anything we want and it's not a big deal. It's only the substantive due process. And there's no reason for that. That's not in the Constitution. That's an entirely made up doctrine that benefits the government each and every time. And this is the point I would make. When you have partial due process, guess what? That's not due process. Due process is only the whole due process as it was understood and defined by the common law at the time the Constitution was signed. Then the third thing they do is they create a tax assessment. They create tax assessment, collection, and seizure statutes, okay? And this is 1.2 million words long. 1.2 million words long. Parts of it are written to over the 20th grade level. I have the 19th grade education, most attorneys do. So it's really for only the attorneys who went to law school and then got their LLM. Somewhere halfway through your LLM, you might understand all of this. And of course, no judges understand it. The number one profession I represent for tax controversy is tax attorney or other attorneys. Attorneys don't understand taxes. No one actually understands it. And then what we have is we overwhelm the people with 122 million words of regulations, rules, rulings, opinions. IRS Notice 2014-21 would be one of those. That's set the whole crypto tax law to explain what those 1.2 million words mean, right? And we all know that no one in Congress reads these bills, and if they did, they wouldn't understand them. They're just told to what to do. We know these things. Then number 5, we make sure that the jury, okay, because we've already avoided the grand jury, that they already taken away the grand jury. Now they're going to take away the right to jury trial, and this is how they do it. They take away the jury trial by lying to the jury. Juries are determiner of fact and law. That was the understanding of it. Fact and law, because that's the protection from an abusive government. Because if the law is passed that the people don't like, no thanks, we're going to say not guilty. That's the ultimate check on federal power here. But they took that away. And so now we have this entirely coercive system because no one can fight it back against it because it's just default assumption. So now this is how you go. Now with that hanging above you, essentially that you have this incredibly illegal tax, a prosecution combine dangling over your head that you have to contend with that isn't legal in any way, shape, or form. So you have your choices are a plea agreement, a private contract in the form of a deferred prosecution agreement, a conviction, and I'm putting these in quotes, by a jury because it's not a real jury, and the jury isn't allowed to actually do their job. Or D, acquittal, which is still a victory for the government because it's a humiliation ritual and it sent the message. It sent the message. Now, you did say something earlier, Taylor, and I am a little bit of a historical buff, and if you ever want to look into this one, I did just FOIA new documents. I did a video on this years ago, I think in 2016 or 17, but I looked into the Al Capone trial. Because, the government really won a lot in that one. They got everything they wanted to. Geez, Al Capone was such a doofus. He didn't pay his taxes. He didn't take the IRS seriously. And that's, hey, you know what? Hey, no one else could take down Al Capone, but our good old friends at the IRS sure could. And the lifestyle audit is a good thing. Well, actually, so, with so much victory for the government in there, I did get suspicious. So I did look at the documents and I did find the same exact thing. What they did to Al Capone was pretty similar. Al Capone did take the IRS seriously. He did agree he had income. He did try to pay it, but the government twisted the facts and made it impossible to pay it. And everything that you watch on the television screen about the Untouchables is the exact opposite. Really what it looks like is that Al Capone didn't play ball with Treasury Secretary Mellon, who was running his own mobsters. So it was really the government's mobsters versus Al Capone. And that's what the case actually looks like. So what I did is actually I requested the FOIA for all the documents from the National Archives. So that's just so the point is that, look, I know Al Capone. I'm not trying to trace out Rogers like Al Capone. That's not my point. I think there's there's going to be a big difference between the two, but I'm just saying there's no difference between the government.
Well, actually, when I got started on the Ver case, I mean, I thought of the Capone case as well because, it's a tax case, of course. I mean, I understand why you would make that connection.
Yeah, so that is something to take a look at. I will be getting some more of those documents there. So that is all right. So let's see here. So all right. So hey, here we go. We get some comments going here. Right on. So hey, where we go. Make jury nullification. Here we go. Great. Look at that. Our great friend. Thank you so much for joining us. By the way, be sure to take. Hold on, John. Can you? Hold on. I gotta hear. I always get this wrong. Hold on, I gotta hear your recording.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting aspect of it, actually. I'm not sure what the law of jury nullification is that may or may not apply to this, but what jury nullification is, that a jury can basically, nullify and say, nah, we don't agree with this conviction. We don't really care, and that's it. And, I think that we're going through a period where people are less and less trustful of the motives of government, for sure. Okay. There is a growing contingent of people who I believe see the governments of Western democracies and others as simply enemies of the people trying to, maintain their own power at the expense of citizens. We have political parties which really view democracy as for the benefit of benefiting that particular party, rather than individual citizens. And in that context, again, I don't know what the state of jury nullification is, but I think the conditions are really there, okay, to make it a thing if possible.
Juries get to decide what to nullify, not anyone else, and that's the thing. So juries can always decide to nullify. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. We're not going to do it.
I don't know. Yeah, it varies. Okay, it actually varies. I think around the world, around the common law world, for example. But there's no question there's lots of room for individual citizens. Like jury nullification is a specific instance of individual citizens putting curbs on government power. Let's put it that way. Okay, which I think is really correct. And I think there's plenty of room for that. That's for sure. I think that one of the problems with litigating something like the Deferred case, okay, is that the challenge the government would have would be to simplify the issues. And if I were arguing that case for the government, I would focus overwhelmingly on, regardless of what it's worth, he didn't report all he had. Okay, that's what I would have focused on, because then you don't have to get into all these other issues that were raised. But if nothing else, okay, the Deferred case, the Daniel Dugan case in Australia, I think the Assange case, all of these things are a wake-up call to individual citizens that democracy is no way is a spectator sport. And if you want to curb the power of these governments and keep them in their sort of legitimate sphere in society, that the time has come to do that.
And this is what I say to people: if you're a juror and you looking around that room and you can't find the victim, not guilty. Not guilty. That's the answer. That's the only answer. You can't. Who's the gift? The government. No. The government isn't a thing. It doesn't have standing. The government doesn't have standing. I love that. This is some great comments tied to what we're talking about. Borchell, good morning to you. If I understood correctly, Al Capone's mistake was that he was not a unionized mobster. How dare he run independent operations? And that does seem to be what it is, because 100% they were, the Secretary Mellon was involved in bootlegging, and they're part of it. And now this is related. TJ, thank you so much for this comment, because this is related exactly to what's going on today. Because when they bust a drug, we have a couple of things going on. We have IRS level attribution, and also who's getting prosecuted, right? So when they bust a drug trafficker, it's calculated by the gram. The trafficker wholesales it by the kilo or pound. That's not the value, right? But the government prosecution math is never the correct same playbook, differently commodity. Now, this is the other thing too. TJ didn't say this, but who's the number one drug trafficker in the world? The answer, our federal government. And so who gets busted? Oh, those who, as Borchell says, are not union mobsters. Union mobsters are protected by the government. Non-union mobsters are going after. And by the way, individuals just trying to lead free lives are also considered mobsters by this government too.
Oh, Anthony, have you ever heard the phrase "don't steal"? The government doesn't like competition.
Oh God, they hate it. They hate competition every which way, and they have all these tools that we've referenced to really go after people. So let's see here. That's absolutely right. The government hates it. And then exactly. A professor of stuffology here. When we're talking about due process, these trials are agonizing. Could you imagine? How would you? If someone does something bad, how long should a trial really take? Right? Because if it's bad, it should be obvious. But in Roger's case, the bad isn't obvious in any way, shape, or form. So we're going to have to spend months to, figure out what actually happened and say, well, geez, you did something wrong, because we can't say, is it really something, if you renounce your U.S. citizenship because you're harassed by the government, should the government harass you more? That's the whole thing. He renounced his citizenship because he perceived that the government was being unfair to him. Oh, wow. I wonder where he got that idea from.
And Guys, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, jump off prematurely today, which is unfortunate, but I hope to come back in the future and discuss, any issue. But I just want to make a note as well, looking overall at the case here, similar, again, I always point back to the Assange case because that's the other case that I had covered extensively. And that is that there's always a number of legal irregularities on behalf of the U.S. government. So with the Assange case, you had them relying on very shady and unusual witnesses. You had various prosecutorial misconduct in that case. And these used to be far more fresh in my mind at the time, but this is several years ago. And then you also had the same thing with the Deferred case. You mentioned the grand juries, Anthony, and the defense in the Deferred case had claimed that the Spanish prosecutor, that they lied to the grand jury in the U.S. in this case to bring forth these charges. So again, legal irregularities with the Deferred case. But yes, and that is again related. I keep bringing up this 2017 related charges, but it is related to the matter dating back to 2017 with that 1040 NR. That was related to the, it was because his businesses were still domiciled in the U.S., we still had to report. So that's an interesting element to this as well. And I wish I had more time with you. I do have to jump off,
Thanks
unfortunately,
so
but I would point everybody, look, I will be speaking with both of you to update my article, update my timeline. If you want a full in-depth overview of this case that maybe isn't as technical as the discussions here, you can check it out at the Solari report. That's solari.com. It's a detailed overview going through also Roger's early life as well, because he was somebody who was unfortunately a target of the U.S. government well before crypto was even a thing, well before this internet era that we live in today. So I have all the details on that. You could check it out at the Solari report. And I'm going to have to jump off. I hate to cut this short. And I hope to talk to you guys again very soon. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Taylor.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. And I will be watching your presentations back as well for my report. Always a pleasure to see you guys.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Take care.
All right. Excellent that we had Taylor. So yeah, by the way, be sure to follow her. If you're looking for updates, follow her on Twitter. She will update. So that's a great place to stay updated to her reports. So really appreciate everything that she's doing. All right, we got for a few more comments here. Let's see here. What do we think the likelihood of the government ends up claiming Deferred? Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. The thing is this is really what I would say is that I'm going to say it's not likely, even though all of the cards are there, because Roger does have the assets to fight back. And, for the reasons just shown, that there's so many problems with the government has so much to lose. And one thing to consider is the government doesn't like to lose. And this is the thing they don't tell you, okay? Because if you go and they'll say, oh, we have a 91% conviction rate, right? That's what they're going to tell you for tax evasion charges. What they don't tell you is all the cases they dropped out and all the cases that never went there. So they're always trying to create an aura of an invincibility. But the fact is they really only want sure cases. And even those sure cases, some really good attorneys, they can make sure they get losses. So they only want sure things. And I think this is going to be when you have someone who could truly fight back. And really, and the other thing too, not only can he fight back, but he's got a lot of fans. He's not some guy who's, some moral turpitude who people don't like. He's a likable guy with, huge following. So that's not necessarily the guy you want to go after. You want to go after someone, at least you painted them in a light where people will hate them. Like Al Capone. You were able to at least paint, I don't like him, even though everyone in Chicago loved him. He ran a fair square, But so that's what I'd say. My chance. But I am curious what other people think. If they think, John, what do you think? Do you think the government will?
Well, I mean, if they do, they're going to have to litigate exactly the issues they don't want to litigate.
But they have the admission on the willfulness and the amount. Those are pretty great stipulations.
That may be, but if the extra tax is unconstitutional, it doesn't make a difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then it would move into the area of, is a very interesting area of criminal law, what are called impossible attempts, right? No, I'm serious.
That's exactly right. And
Convicted of an attempt to violate a law, that isn't a law, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, to understand that, I mean, it's like what happens, and this was a major thing I remember, the only thing I remember I ever did in law school was wrote this paper on impossible attempts. Okay. And, I mean, the way you view it is this. I mean, what happens if you're walking out of a restaurant, you see an umbrella you like, and you decide to steal it, and it turns out it's your own umbrella? Can you?
Impossibility. That was impossible. I think that was my favorite topic in criminal law. Impossibility. I love that. That was always fun. You get these things. You feel like these things.
They claim a breach. They're back where they started. And I am inclined, first of all, I don't think he's going to breach it. I think he's going to ensure that or take maximum steps to just stay out of the United States. I mean, he doesn't even have any right to enter the United States. Okay, he's not a citizen, right? For one thing. But I think he'll try to stay out. And no, I think we've seen the end of this for the moment. Okay, but the peripheral issues that affect more people are still there, and they're live.
And this is something that people don't understand. When the IRS has an issue that's sort of vague and out there and it's big, what they do is make sure they don't litigate it. But they'll give a specter, we're going to go this way. So everyone's under fear, like, okay, I think this is what they're going to do if they do it, but they've never done it, but they're throwing it out there. So that's one of the ways that the government gets their way too, is through the threat of uncertainty. Well, what should I do here? And, we see this again. Has that government ever filed a lawsuit to claim that a foreign mutual fund is a passive foreign PFIC? No, never. They're never going to do it. Why? Because that could offer clarity, and that also could go against their way. So they're much better off sending it out to the tax industry, letting them launder their illegal thing to say, hey, all mutual funds are PFICs when they're not. There's nothing to indicate that. We've gone over that extensive time. So that's just one of the things what the government does is they leave these things unknown. And when you ask for clarity on something, they specifically don't address it. That is what we've seen that done on the FBAR, on 3520As, and all various reporting. People ask the question, hey, does this apply to this? And they specifically don't answer it because they want to have this vague as possible, because vague infers that, hey, we might have power here, here, and here. The government never wants to give up any of its power whatsoever. And then the other thing too is like, well, why I wouldn't want to, if I was a government, I wouldn't want to do this because I think, hey, look, you got a problem with your grand jury because grand juries investigate, not the government. So a fundamental problem with everything, they could lose that. That's huge. And then, so what's this? David, thank you for your comment. Good morning to you. Is that incompleteness probably intentional to avoid him making directly guilty of the charge? Oh boy, I'm not sure what you're referring to. John, do you know what he's referring to? He was talking to something else we were just talking about. Must have been. David, if you could just rephrase that, I want to answer your question. I'm not getting it right now. Let's see here. Yeah, right. Okay, here's another one. One of the conditions that Vera doesn't publicly oppose the admission he has made in the agreement. I'm not aware that he has. But Vera hates the covenant because he has, he likes to interview. So yeah, I mean, so he can't say anything, and we don't have the whole picture anyway. It doesn't seem like we have the entire story, whatever it is. And, that's one issue, we have this, we didn't talk about these non-prosecution agreements. Well, the first one is in 1992. Yep, this magically constitutional thing just didn't exist until 1992. That's when it was, the first one. And so I have a whole bunch of problems with the non-prosecution agreements because, someone had this comment up here. Someone had the comment. I'm sorry if I don't get it. Because who had it? One of you geniuses had the comment. There it is right here. Can people enter into agreements that abrogate or divest rights? Well, this is what I would say. What's the consideration? If we have a contract, both parties need to have consideration. What's the consideration that Roger Ver received? And the answer is nothing, because the government is using an illegal criminal process to put him in duress. That, again, if we go through it, none of this was actually followed by the Constitution. So we have an illegal charge, an illegal indictment, a legal process that you say, hey, look, if you want out of this illegal process, you better sign here. So you have a problem on a contractual basis. You have a huge problem. Then it's like, aren't trials supposed to be public? because you have a private agreement that the defendant can't even talk about, and that's supposed to be justice. And this thing was what are we doing here?
Deferred this is not about justice. This is about stealing $50 million from him. Okay. Or maybe it's not. Maybe he owed it. I don't know. But it's getting to agree. All this is about is he agrees to give them $50 million in exchange for they're not going after him to lock him up for the rest of his life. That's all this is. Okay. Now there are more, detailed aspects to it, etc. But at its core, that's what it is. I mean, this is the conversation he has with his lawyers. Look, they're willing, if you want to pay everything that they say that you owe, and agree that you are willful and agree to not ever oppose this publicly, then, and you're a good boy for 3 years, okay, on unrelated issues, then they won't continue with the prosecution. That's all this is. Now, on Harvey's point, if I were Mr. Ver, I would be careful about appearing on podcasts, or making public statements. As it says, the government in sole discretion determines the breach. So, that's where it is. I think that, look, on the one hand, okay, obviously, I think that people should, obey the law and be in compliance with the law. On the other hand, the very fact that they went after him in a criminal context without giving him a chance to settle up is really, really government overreach and abuse in the extreme. Okay, Absolutely. There's no question about that. Yeah. And, it's very easy to simultaneously, which I think I do, take the position that people should be obeying the law, but at the same time, I think these people are completely out of control. Okay? And this is an example of it. The Assange thing, that Taylor was talking about is an example of it. But what do you do about that? The problem is that, over time, people have voluntarily assumed a world where government has more and more power, and it's time to take that back.
There we go. Yes, absolutely. I do want to, here's one, here's a great comment. Yeah. So Borchell, Borchell, I did do a video on it. If you go to IRS Medic and just search Al Capone, I did a video, you'll see that. And I do reference some of the items that are publicly available, but this is the interesting thing, folks. This is what I did. I did, I think Monday, or maybe it was a Friday. I think Friday I did. Friday, I submitted a FOIA request for all the Treasury Department's records on the Al Capone trial. And I also requested from the National Archives. Okay, so I sent a request to the IRS and the National Archives. National Archives are on shutdown. The IRS FOIA division isn't. So sort of weird. Anyway, I'm hoping to get those, usually, the IRS is usually about 8-10 weeks with these sort of things. So hopefully I get that, but I'm looking to redo it again with a little bit more detail because there were some missing things. There's clearly some missing things. And I was really inferring a lot of things from the few documents that were there, but you will see what you can find is a letter from Al Capone's attorney saying that, hey, yeah, Al's realizing that he does have some income. He thinks he makes, and it's a small amount. He says he thinks he made about $20,000 last year. He's happy to pay taxes on that. Now, this is the reason why Al Capone's attorney was probably correct. What Al Capone was a problem gambler. He was a problem gambler, so much so that he bought a horse track because he lost money that much. And so he's running a horse track, losing money. And the thing is, he really can't, mobsters doesn't work like you can't cheat at your horse track. You can't, no, because you're going to get killed and people won't bet at your horse track. So he had to run a fair shop there and he lost substantial money. And when you look at his lifestyle, those were all kind of business expenses. He did business at that hotel. That lavish hotel was a business expense. Everything about him was a business expense. Mostly $20,000 was a ton of money, and would have easily paid for the lifestyle that he did have for his private things. So his attorney was likely telling the truth, But the government didn't like that, right? They didn't like that. So they invented an entirely different thing, which is what they do in a whole thing. And then the propaganda behind it too, to really, I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, the government really got a lot of propaganda out of the untouchables. Oh yeah, the nerds were there to save the day. No, I don't think so. Plea bargaining is way too much. There's no such thing. And really, as a criminal, I started as a criminal defense attorney, not a criminal attorney. I started as a criminal defense attorney. But essentially what happened, there's really nothing to do because everyone qualifies for a public defender and everything's going to be a deal. So is your client program eligible? Okay. In the rare cases that you actually get a trial. And then one thing to think about is when a defendant who takes a plea on every single charge pleads innocent to a claim, why? And I was talking to a clerk up at the Connecticut Supreme Court over the weekend. And I was just telling her, it's like, because I told her I did a lot of habeas work. I said, whenever there's a trial of someone with a record, you really have to ask a lot of questions. Why did they not take the plea? And this is what I asked I'd always ask my clients because I did a lot of habeas appeals, direct appeals. And I would say, hey, look, I notice, you kind of have a little bit of a record and you usually take a plea. Why didn't you take a plea on this charge? And they say it every time. It gets me because this time I didn't do it. And I was like, I didn't think they could convict me. And then I'm like, yeah, I know, huh? LOL. Yeah, no, they get, that's how you get. I have a lot of I have a lot of guys in prison who didn't think they could be convicted of crimes they didn't commit. And now, yeah, no, that's what you go away for. So it's always something to think about. It's so criminal, right? Yeah, I agree with you on this, my friend. Yes, the U.S. government is a tyrannical terrorist organization. No question about it. The DOJ likes to use the phrase "no one is above the law." Oh God, right? Oh my God, what is the law, DOJ? Right? They are the most illegal. The most illegal things on the planet is our own Department of Justice. No question about it. I mean, we just went through it. They have stolen the power from the people, and this result shows it. This result is not the result of a fair judicial system in any way, shape, or form. This is not the result of a fair judicial system that represents the will of the people at all. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. So here, thanks, David. Simulation spelled to mens rea. You don't think so, David? See, I think that willfulness. See, that's the thing. That's the thing that I'm concerned. Now, maybe I didn't look at it close enough. So maybe I just need to look at it a little closer. To me, when you see willfulness, I'm like, oh, geez, we got willfulness. But what is willfulness? That's not right. That, like, you meant to say specific intent, but there they are taking their Title 31 term and applying it to their, to their tax evasion charges. So yeah, maybe I just need to look at that a little closer, David. Thank you very much for that comment.
Is that that includes the mens rea, but not the actus reus. I think it does actually, but I mean, I didn't read it, with that particular question in mind.
Yeah, and so where I am now, and David, I could be wrong. I'll review it again. Is that it does spell out the difficult to prove thing, the mens rea, but the action part, which John think there is, though, all that stuff would be easier to prove. But the mens rea is the hardest thing.
I thought that what that said was, or maybe that was just my assumption, because I mean, I read both the agreement and then I reread the actual indictment last night. But I mean, the indictment clearly spells out the allegations that would meet the test for the actus reus. If the deferred prosecution agreement says that he agrees with those charges, then I think that's probably enough. I think that this is all done and dusted. Okay, it's the single biggest problem. Okay, I didn't say this because it slipped my mind at the time, but I actually think, from Mr. Vere's perspective, the single biggest problem with this is the admission of willfulness.
I think it's because I think it's a lie. I don't think he was willful.
Well, he may. Look, I'm sympathetic to Mr. Vere as well, but we don't know that. Okay, but what we do know, I think, is this: that to go through life now, with the admission of willfulness on this is not, is not something that's likely to be problem free. basically the result of this is that what he gets is he stays out of jail. The government gets everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It's impossible, I think, to describe this stuff as winners and losers. I think the whole thing is extremely unfortunate. Um,
Well, the
I
American
don't.
people are a clear loser. I mean, that we know that.
Uh, well, yeah. I mean, when you look at what's going on here, I think that it is, if if the people of America, the citizens of America, want to take the position that it is a democracy, that it
It's
is a
on.
democratic republic, meaning representative of the public, I think they need to take steps,
Yeah.
to get sufficiently interested and push back on this so that governments, so that this growth of government overreach cannot continue. I mean,
Yeah.
they're weaponizing everything. The
Everything
tax
is weaponized. And Parvizi,
is
here we go. Yeah, kind of, so here's the question: do you know whether a deferred prosecution agreement that prohibits the defendant from making public statements opposing a statement is normal? This is the thing: is that it has been done. There's a few. It looks like I found about 5 or 6 where there might have been gag orders, but the whole thing isn't normal. This is a novel thing that invented in 1992. So it was an invention of the government in 1992. So the whole thing, a deferred prosecution agreement, is not something authorized by the Constitution. It's made up by the government to basically,
Well,
help
let
them.
me ask you this. Why would the government want that? I mean, how does that serve the interests of the government? I mean, I'm not sure I know the answer.
Well, I would say this because a plea agreement would be very difficult. Because in order to have a plea agreement, there needs to be a factual basis of the plea. Judge has to enter a factual basis of a plea. I don't even think a judge can understand the factual basis of the plea. So that's one of the why is there not a plea agreement? Because hey, why don't you go that way?
So in
Because
other words, he can't run around saying, "Well, I had no choice. I did this because I just didn't want to spend the rest of my life in jail." I guess,
right,
so they don't want him,
yeah,
revealing the true nature of the arrangement.
right. You can't tell the truth. Basically, this agreement says you can't tell the truth, which would be a contract term against public policy. So its enforceability would be in doubt. But hey, that's a big gamble to make, right? So I think silence for the next 3 years. Maybe I think in 2028 we look forward to having Roger on the show. Maybe he can talk about it then. But we're gonna have to wait a bit of time.
Well, I think that the agreement to not oppose his admission of willfulness is a permanent thing. I don't think that's just within the 3-year period. The 3-year thing is just to not, break any other, external law.
Oh, and I missed this. I went over it. Oh my God, the agreement is drafted. It even makes. Oh my God.
I think that's the case. I mean, so we have a question here, and I'm just sort of answering as well as I can.
Oh my
But
God, the agreement is. Oh my God, this is. And then
it,
because if anyone says something, well, hey, look, at this point, you talked. Oh my, you're an agent of him. Oh my God. Oh my
well,
God.
look, here's the thing that you know, mens rea willfulness is rarely determined by direct evidence, right? If you look at the original indictment, there's a long, long section where the government explains its theory of attempts to defraud, etc. And um, clearly there is evidence of that, right? Or at least in their universe. Whether that meets the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, it's a different issue altogether. I mean, I guess what they're doing is they're just saying, look, we don't want the credibility of the Department of Justice undermined by anybody saying that we were engaging in a prosecution where there was an issue of willfulness or something like that. I don't know. Look, the whole thing is horrible. It's, since we have Parviz here making comments, I think what I might say is that one thing that is a clear and definite inference from all of this is that every American citizen needs a second citizenship. I mean, this is a very tyrannical, out of control government. And I think even they would agree with that. The difference is they're proud of it. Individual Americans are victims of it.
Thank you, John. Get some more comments in. I am not that way. I kind of want them to take me into custody. I'm not going to run. I'm going to fight. So I'm going to be here. They can come and get me.
Michael Lynch case, right? The Lynch extradition. Do you know about this, Anthony?
Which one? Lynch? No. Tell me about
it. This was a guy who was extradited from the UK. Anyway, he won. He won his jury trial. He won. Take a look at it, Michael Lynch. He's dead now. There was a boating accident, but
imagine that, huh? Oh my God! Wow.
Look, the broader theme here is this, okay? That if you are concerned by the rollout here, if you are concerned with the increasing arbitrariness and power of government, the only way I know to stop that growth is to figure out ways to return the democratic process to individual citizens. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we have to restore the rule of law. I mean, that's really what it is. We've only had over 200 years of statutory interference with our fundamental rights. And I think, by the way, we are, yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. We are, there you go. Exactly. We have that going on too. No matter where, no matter which way you look at it there, but now look, we've talked about some bad things, right? This is, I'm not we are, and to me, I am seeing a terrible government vindicated by this. They got their way. And again, and what do they, the government employees doing this, what are they risking? The answer is nothing, right? They don't have to do, hey, look, if we're acting unconstitutional, whatever, we have qualified immunity, which is a judge made up thing, right? Which is all a judge made up thing. This is the thing though. However, there is good news going on here, folks. And that's the thing. I don't want that to get lost. And, I'm very doomish on all of this, but there's some very good things happening right now. Neil Gorsuch is really leading the charge in Supreme Court. And so let's not lose sight of that while the Department of Justice has its little scalp here and they could go dance and do their little thing, whatever it is.
They don't have their scalp. They don't have their scalp. They have $50 million. Okay. I doubt very much that there's a huge critical mass of people who see this as, in the way that it's been prosecuted, as justice. Okay. I doubt it. But
great comment, David. All right. This is hilarious. Dave. Yes, David. In the land of the free, we're equal protection under the law, right? When I talked about how they define due process in a totally different way, and well, that's substantive due process, but this is what we have here, right? Because we have a system where more people are unequal or more equal than others. And the case is this, and this is something we've covered so much. When you're expatriating, if you happen to be one of the lucky few who's a dual citizen by birth, guess what? There is no exit tax. Roger Ver, if he was only fortunate enough not to be a true American at birth, but rather a dual citizen, he wouldn't have had all of this. And so that's absolutely right, David. Thank you for bringing it up. That's a huge point of how utterly insane this is.
There is more to it than that. However, it's the point I've made repeatedly. I'll make it again. The single most precious gift that people are thinking about family planning, Americans, right, would be to have your children born under circumstances where they're a dual citizen from birth.
That's right. The gold standard.
And, that's absolutely right. I mean, this whole thing unfolded because Roger Ver was a covered expatriate and he could have avoided that status. So, I mean, the thing about it is, we have citizenship taxation, but we also have citizenship non-taxation, right? I mean, the whole thing, everything about this has so many elements of
it's so much federal government in it. Really, it's maximum federal government. And now this is great, Parviz. Thank you for this. Resident immigration expert, multiple citizens. This is a great, and the unfortunate thing for Ver, though it is not even an admission, in absence of a prosecution can count as a conviction for many immigration purposes. His freedom of movement may be restricted. Wow. Yeah, no, and I mean, the federal government doesn't think anything about your passport, right? They don't think anything about that. It's not really their right to take your passport, to do anything to you, to restrict your right of travel. The government believes its statutes can interfere with your fundamental right to travel, and it will incarcerate you for that, and it will imprison you for that. So that's something to think about too. That is an imagine. Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, there we go. Roger Ver really should have. Yeah, Roger Ver really should have thought about that. Roger, why weren't you born a dual citizen by birth? Did you ever talk to your parents about that? Did you have that conversation? Like, hey, what was this all about, guys? Did you, And I think there's a lot of people out there right now, a lot of parents. I do wonder myself where I went wrong. My children are just merely Americans, and even I failed too, to some degree.
America has a caste system of citizenship, right?
Yes.
It's a caste system.
Yeah.
Where the lowest forms of life in the United States would be somebody who would, trace their lineage directly to the daughters of the American Revolution.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be the lowest form, the untouchables, if you will,
right.
of human society.
I had a grandmother, Dar. I could do it. I guess if I was female, I could do it. But yeah, right, exactly. So I would say that it punishes Americans who are trying to live a good life the most, and that's what we have. It's just and so the good thing about this too. Oh yeah, I wanted to get back to this, but we have been seeing and this is really the thing. Civilly, look, this is the Department of Justice. Department of Justice. Let's put that in quotes, right? Okay, let's put that in quotes. This is not the IRS Civil Division. Because the IRS Civil Division has a much, much greater problem that they will likely lose their tax court. That Neil Gorsuch does look like he has his sights set on the administrative tribunal known as tax court. And this is not me saying tax court judges are bad. The process is bad. Actually, tax court justices, I find, get the law better than district court judges in many cases. I can point to some of those. So that's not it. But the problem with it is it's not constitutional. It's not an Article III court that's deciding common law issues of if people owe money. So the problem is that tax court goes away, that the government is going to have a problem in its assessments, that it will lose its ability to make extrajudicial assessments is what they do. That when the government, look, this is what the government did because it wants your stuff so much, is that it's created a blanket silent tax lien on a dollar you make when you make it. When you make a dollar, whenever you make it, wherever you make it in the universe, the U.S. government has a silent lien on that dollar. And then what you're left with is whatever they left you with. You're left with your allowance. But the government claims, and this is actually true, 100% ownership of any dollar you make when you make it. And that's the default assumption. And from that default assumption, everything follows to the government's advantages. That's how these ridiculous things happen. And again, tax court is often the voice of reason, by the way. Not saying that I'm not saying that there aren't great decisions where I'm like nodding my head and say, amen, amen, amen. I do. And I often think you can get a better result with tax court than a district court, especially a DC court. That's where you don't want to be. That one is really interesting. That seems to be the last refuge of the Clinton and Obama administrations there, and the Biden administrations. That's where you get a very, very bad result there. Imagine that. Washington, D.C. is where you go to find injustice. Yeah, I know. They're so surprised. So that's what we have. I think that's where we have. We got to all the comments. Thank you, everyone. We got great comments today. I really appreciate it. I do want to give some general. I do want to just say thank you, everyone. I want to just thank Taylor again. So let me get Taylor. If you want to follow her on X, we're going to get her on again, hopefully to talk about the Duggan extradition treaty, John. Maybe next week for that. That wouldn't be.
Well, that hearing is going on tomorrow in Australia, and that is. I think people don't understand why that's such an important case for American citizens abroad. It's because basically, as we know, there's citizenship for immigration purposes, there's citizenship for tax purposes, right? So Mr. Duggan, uh, apparently, as I understand it, has a certificate of loss of nationality based on naturalizing Australian in 2012. He didn't get the CLN until something like 2016. The U.S. government is trying to take the position that he was actually a citizen until he received the CLN, which I don't believe is correct as a matter of immigration law. What they're trying to do is use the tax definition of citizenship instead of the immigration definition. But anyway, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I think it's not as immediately apparent why that's important, but it is very important. So, maybe we can talk about that next week or whatever. I think that would be a very good topic.
All right. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of. Oh, thank you for this. And by the way, and this is what I want to, Parviz, thank you so much for this. And this is something, guys, if you take a look at my channel, you're going to see that I have been shadow banned. So it's actually kind of stinks because we do this great content and we should be getting more views, but YouTube does not like. I mean, that's kind of I take that as actually a compliment because we're not that big, but YouTube does look at us as a controversial because we're actually talking about the law. And so YouTube is throttling us. And so really what I could, really use from everyone is to try to break the algorithm and also try to work outside the algorithm, share this content to the people you know, and really, we got to rally around because the government really, and it's really fascinating. I had no idea that I would be shadow banned for that we would get shadow banned so terribly. And I mean, what's funny is like, how it is if you look at the amount of comments we have. We have the engagements from the smartest people around, and I do appreciate you guys. And actually, I do kind of sometimes suspect if it's you guys who are causing me to be shadow banned, that the algorithm is like, oh look, all IRS Medic gets all these controversial followers who follow this, and this. All right, it must be bad because of the people following it. So I also do suspect you guys a little bit for that. And Sherry, yes, thank you, Sherry. Good morning to you. I hope you're enjoying. You are shadow banned. Yes, look at that. I am shadow banned. Thank you so much, YouTube. Thank you so much, government. Government does run YouTube, by the way. We know that. So that's what we're dealing with here. And I'm losing followers too. Yeah, I have subscribers leaving. Yeah, so they're really exactly. Yeah, so Rob, you could be a cause. TJ, yep. I think all you guys are to blame. We're all in it together. So here we are. There's going to be, less and fewer of us, but the conversation will be getting better and better. And I really do appreciate it. I mean, really, yeah, it's going down, Sherry. Yep, it's going down. I see that, and it's just, this is what happens when you tell the truth. It's not necessarily the greatest thing for my business. Yes. And yeah, exactly. We know who's behind it. Yeah, we know who's behind it, right? And that's the reason why. And so that's really when are we going to write a book? Yeah.
Oh. I've got all you need is I've got so many blog posts that can be organized into a book already. The trick would be not to write the book. The trick would be to pare the book down.
Yes, we have to curate the book. Basically, that's what he's about. Sure. And I guess anyone could curate it. Go to citizenshipsolutions.ca and curate that book. Well, I don't know. We should do a book at some time too. I think people would like that. Maybe things that aren't a little bit more about what got us into this. But if you want to reach out to John, by the way, here's his email. By the way, we are going to hop off. I do appreciate it, guys. And please, if you are looking for tax prep, we do a lot of that. You could, my firm, we love doing it. We love doing streamlined disclosures. Always thing. If you have tax questions, guys, I'm sending you my email right here because so few people are going to see it. Right? I could put my email. I don't have to worry about spam because so few people are going to see my email here. So if you have anything coming up, you want to talk to me, something confidential that you don't want to put it on a chat, any issue you're going on, there's my actual real email. It'll go right to my email inbox. So there it is. Do that. And I do appreciate, again, subscribe to if you haven't already. And someday I think my subscriber count will be down to, I guess, about 50. I guess that's what we're gonna pare it down. Google is gonna pare it down so that people don't know who is actually running this country, right? And that they have been from a while. And it's been a long, long deception. And as we reveal the histories and go back, we can see the deception started much, much earlier than people realize. And really, this is what I'll leave you guys with, is that the United States Constitution primarily acts as a debt instrument. It claims to protect our individual rights, but we can see with Roger Vere's story, no, it doesn't. No, it does not. It does not. The Constitution does not protect rights. But what it most certainly does is the Constitution allows for a seizure mechanism to enrich the sponsors of the U.S. government. The original sponsors of the U.S. government were not good people. They were slave traders who speculated on worthless bonds, and they became the new owners of America once that Constitution was signed. So yes, America does have a birth defect. It's right at the beginning. It's a lie. There was no problem with the Articles of Confederation other than it didn't allow for the graft, the wholesale graft that the U.S. Constitution allowed for. What we're dealing with is a natural, logical consequence of the Constitution, because the Constitution put the debt holders of Americans who are non-person, again, slave traders, at a more higher level than the people it's supposed to represent. And everything we've seen from the government since then, with a little bit of relief, Jefferson was helpful. He was definitely a good guy. JFK was a good guy. Jackson was probably pretty good. I might stop my list there. That might be where my list stops. Maybe McKinley, maybe a little bit. But that's about where my list stops. We have not had, anyone good, because we are still at the mercy of the federal government, which pays for our education, to claim that the federal government was always the good guy, always won because we were the good guy. And so when we start questioning these things and going back to the history, it falls apart. And my red pill into it has been the U.S. tax system. That has been my red pill into it as well. And I think we have the book. We didn't mention it yet, but here's the one. This is the red pill. Read the chapter on America. Then you're going to know what we're dealing with. Then you'll know what we have here. Good for evil, the impact of taxes on the course of civilization, by the great Charles Adams. That is where you will find everything. We know. All right. McKinley. All right, great. In this, right on. America needs an enema. Thank you, Sherry. We're going to leave with that. This is Anthony Perrin for John Richardson and Taylor Hudak. Thanks so much for joining us today.